A whistleblower can be anyone who was either in the room or doing something that let him hear what the president was saying to the president of Ukraine. And he knew it's very bad. He can't threaten another president to help him win the next election.
Hello and welcome to E Potibus Unum. I'm Etan.
And I'm Dan.
And on today's episode, we're going to talk about when it came to the propaganda wars, who predicted it better, Aldous Huxley or George Orwell, and how can we recognize it and use that?
All right. And we're going to go to Jim Jordan, who is the voice now of the Republican Party.
Seriously. The public portion of impeachment is underway.
And an interview with Twitter activist Allison Green.
Ooh.
With an E at the end.
So what is this podcast about? And why did we choose the name? Well, E Potibus Unum is a play on E Pluribus Unum, which literally translates from the Latin as out of many one.
Yeah, that is the motto of our country.
Exactly. So it's no secret that America has become more fractured, and as the Republican Party is now openly embracing white nationalism, authoritarianism, and the politics of hate and fear, Dan and I felt that we couldn't stay silent any longer as we watched our democracy fall into decline.
Correct. We will not be silent.
Republicans, though, they know how to message, which allows them to be able to continue to move further and further to the right. This is the Overton window, pushing politics more and more conservatively. They've done this since the early 70s. So out of the many voices of the Americans who still value democracy, freedom, and our liberties, regardless of party, we still represent the majority of the country. The problem is that we haven't always been the best at being able to articulate ourselves.
No, we've been horrible as progressives, Democrats, horrible.
Yeah, that's why we started this podcast, to provide some thoughts and guidance in helping Americans, from our elected officials in the highest offices to everyday people sitting around the dinner table, to be able to counter the false narratives of authoritarianism and hate and best message true American values. In 1985, philosopher Neil Postman discussed the difference between Aldous Huxley and George Orwell and their visions of the future. In short, Orwell felt that information would be heavily censored and prevent truths from being recognized, while Huxley speculated that the truth would be drowned out in a sea of irrelevance and misinformation. What the right has picked up on is they recognize that it was Huxley. Lewis Powell wrote a famous memo back in the early 70s telling businesses to unite and that they'd have to spend millions and millions of dollars on lobbying, on corporate lobbying. Roger Ailes, who worked for Nixon, also felt that the lessons of Watergate weren't that Republicans shouldn't commit crimes. It was that Republicans were above the law, and therefore Nixon never should have resigned. And he felt, hey, if we had a propaganda network, then maybe Nixon never would have resigned. Yeah. So fast forward to today, Fox viewers, 98% of those who get their main news from Fox oppose impeachment.
Yeah, well, it's not all of them.
Yeah, you have it's a healthy 2% that might consider impeachment, like on a Wednesday.
Sure.
If it's sunny out. 55% of those same people said that there's nothing that Trump can do to lose their support. Yeah. And I think, I don't quote me on this, but I think one of the questions was, could he literally shoot someone on Fifth Avenue? And they're like, yeah. Okay.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, no, I know. I saw a thing where one of his supporters was like, well, it depends on what did the person do who got shot. I'm like, all right, it's unbelievable. But, let's be clear too. It's not just Fox News. Also, these conservative radio
sure, you
guys.
Have about 90%.
Since the 70s, 80s have been. They're everywhere, and they're in people's radios and people's jobs. It's a big.
It's everywhere. It's Sinclair Broadcasting also, which has a very top-down policy of keeping the same message on all of their broadcasting stations.
Because it works.
Right.
And that's what we're fighting against. But, we have to fight with the weapons that are there.
It's why Trump calls, Sean Hannity once or twice a day to coordinate the messages.
Because he realizes messaging oftentimes, if not most times, is more important than legislation.
Absolutely. So a quick bit of psychology on this. According to Dr. Abigail Marsh, a professor of psychology at Georgetown University, both liberals and conservatives agree that harm of innocence is a bad thing, and they also value fairness. Conservatives, however, believe in authority, purity, and loyalty to a group. This is why you can see in the Repug Party how it's moved more and more toward white nationalism, right?
Sure.
It's authority, it's purity, and of course, they need loyalty to the group.
They're just following orders. It sounds really familiar.
Also, it's the tenets of a cult, which is exactly why Trump has a cult following.
Yeah. No, but Scaramucci...
I think he and I actually may have gone to the same high school at different times.
You're not that old. Yeah, no, but Scaramucci said that he said literally he pointed out like a few points that are about, that made the case for Trumpism being a cult. And he went through all the things. One of the things was not believing the actual facts, but believing the cult leader and the facts that he tells you.
Well, are you going to believe that, me or your own lying eyes?
Yeah, no, but that's literally one of the big things in a cult. I mean, that's why people are like, how can you believe in this crazy guy? And,
So to that point, Dr. Marsh also describes how they view others as less than human. If you're part of the outgroup, you are not considered human. Yeah. They then tell their followers that their group is under threat and that they must attack these so-called others.
Right.
In this case,
classic cult behavior.
Yeah, in this case, it's the majority of Americans who are not white, heterosexual, wealthy men.
Yeah, and even the ones that aren't wealthy, they're also part of that whole thing. It's like Johnson said: if you can make a poor white person think he's better than a black person, you can put your hand in his pocket all day.
Oh yeah. Another thing is cults need to be isolated from dissenting news, which is what they do. This is why you hear the repugs on the right always rail on investigative journalists and why Trump calls them the so-called enemy of the people. In reality, they present a challenge to his cult and authority, and journalists do that. So like all cults, such as Jonestown or ISIS or the Klan, they believe that laws do not apply to them. And since any law that they would be violating was written by those that they see as illegitimate, in this case, the American people, it's fine for them to violate that. So when they're forced to actually confront reality, like say go on CNN or have public hearings like this, they use a technique which was mastered by the Russians called both-siderism. This is where they try to compare apples and oranges. This is exactly what they're doing right now. And they throw everything that they can against the wall, from debunked conspiracy theories to ad hominem attacks to whining that the hearings aren't, quote, sexy enough. That was, I mean, that was unbelievable. The entire right-wing media was just saying, oh, these aren't sexy hearings. Then they say, so what if he betrayed his oath of office? It's fine. Yeah. He's our leader. To my absolute personal favorite is Trump couldn't betray his oath of office because he's too stupid and incompetent. Yeah,
that was Lindsey Graham.
There's a couple other people there. So.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, what it is, too, is like they basically have the thing where they start off like, oh, he didn't do it. Then it's like, well, yeah, he did it, but it's not that bad.
Right.
And it's like, well, yeah, he did it, and it's not that bad. But everyone else does it. So what's the,
right? And it's when you lack any sort of actual facts behind your argument, right, Dan? Then you have to just keep shouting nonsense at it. Facts are on your side, argue the facts. If the law is on your side, argue the law. And if neither, then pound the table.
Yeah.
So they do that, and then they go crying back to Fox News so they could go under their security blankets and just shout in their bubbles, under their blankets, where they don't have to be hurt. Because, I mean, these are the real snowflakes out there, isn't it? If you can't actually have a legitimate discussion then why are you here? Why are you here? Present your argument. Don't just keep shouting nonsense at everyone. Yeah. I think a great example of this, Dan, was last Sunday's Meet the Press, where Rand Paul was on it, and he, of course, spewed some nonsense. One of the debunked theories of Ukraine, of the server in Ukraine, and Chuck Todd did almost nothing. Greg Sargent from the Washington Post said Paul's basic framing stood unchallenged. But you see, this is exactly goes back to my earlier point of Aldous Huxley saying if we muddy the waters and get mainstream media to equate nonsense with facts, then that's it. And they've done this for years with climate change. I mean, they've had, and even before that, they did it with tobacco, if you remember.
Yep.
And in interviews, Steve Bannon has said that the entire point is to get these ideas into the public discussion, into mainstream media, no matter how discredited they may be. It doesn't matter. It just matters that they muddy the waters. So, you can take a shit in somebody's water fountain and just say, well, I've muddied the waters. You can't have clean water now. That's
right. But it's also like people then can't do anything against it.
Right, because you have to say, well, I'm trying to have clean water here. And you're like, no, there's a turd in your water.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, exactly. It's just like, it's sort of like when, in those TV shows in the 80s when, a ninja would come out and you would try to capture the ninja and then he would set off a smoke bomb. You're creating this smoke so you can't, achieve your objective of getting the ninja, or in our case, trying to change our country's laws.
So in this, now ninjas are bad.
Ninjas are, yes, ninjas are bad. You're trying to kill the ninja, but then he does a smoke bomb. Yeah. So the Republicans are kind of putting smoke bombs everywhere.
So, yeah. Okay. So luckily, Jim Hines came on after that and cleared it up. He did a great job clapping back. It went viral.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Which was fantastic, debunking the conspiracy theories. But this is the both siderisms. And then, of course, the pendulum swings back. The next day, Reuters and NBC News wrote pieces about the first day of the public impeachment, complaining that they weren't entertaining enough. Where are they getting this nonsense from? I mean, this is an impeachment hearing. There's also a framing issue here where the next day, some publications and media said it went very well for Democrats. The first day of hearings went well for Democrats, but it's not about Democrats versus Republicans. It's about the rule of law. It's about obtaining the truth, and it's about preserving American democracy. That's the frame that we really need to be.
That's old school. Nobody believes in that anymore.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's also the way the news operates. I mean, they operate on such a base level,
right? In
that they want to make things into teams: the black versus the white, or maybe that's a bad example, but the blue team versus the red team, right? So they want to make it like that, like it's a game to excite people to watch it. When the reality is, this is very serious business. This is like doing your taxes or bringing your daughter to the hospital. This is serious. This is not something. It's not entertainment.
Right. So when you cheapen it and turn it into winners versus losers, which is all that they talk about, you're not making it quote unquote palatable to the average person.
Yeah.
You're not doing your job.
You're shitting on the discourse that should be happening.
If you're going to talk about winners and losers, then at least put it in the correct context. This is about the rule of law.
One side is trying to uphold the Constitution. The other side is saying it's okay to have a king and that he can do whatever he wants. Right. That's what's going on.
Another bit is that you do also see a lot on the right, and I'm compiling this from two interviews of read the transcript. So Trump is saying read the transcript. And what that is about is, well, he knows people aren't going to read it. He knows that enough people aren't going to read it. And if you did read it, he's guilty as fuck there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in clear black and white. Because, a good however many people won't read it. All he has to say is say it confidently enough, like, hey, if you read this transcript, it exonerates me. Right? And enough people will say, yeah, hey, Trump said it, so it must be true. It's the same thing why during the campaign, if you asked, your regular person in uniform or vet, they say, well, Trump supports our military. Well, how do you know that? And in the interview, they said, well, because he says Trump supports our military. There are signs, people holding signs, Trump supports our military. So most people are not actually going to do the research and see, what his policies are, what people's policies are. But if they see somebody as a sign and somebody just says it over and over and over and over again, then it gets into the zeitgeist, it gets into people's heads, and they say, oh yeah, I guess Trump does support our military.
Oh boy. So we got this Jim Jordan.
Jesus.
So-
GYM Jordan.
Yeah, he's the worst. He's the temporary member of the House Intelligence Committee. He's going to be questioning the witnesses during the impeachment hearings.
I love that. They're like, oh, we don't have anyone. We got to bring in this lunatic because he just yells at everyone. All he does is yell at people.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
I know
why they
plenty
put
of
him
people.
in there.
You could get anyone off the corner and off the train in New York City
Yeah.
to just yell at people. He'd do as good a job as Jim Jordan.
Yeah, no, that's why they put him in there. He's an attack dog. No one sticks up for him, or for Trump rather, the way he does. So that's why they put him in there temporarily, just because he represents what the Republicans think is the bee's knees. So you think, who is this guy?
The bee's knees.
Is he a fighter for truth, justice, and the American way, or an opportunist who will defend whoever's in power?
My guess is opportunist.
To help him get ahead, even if that person in power is a monster. So, I know what we just. I know the collective decision because he's obviously a bad person.
I'm still guessing opportunist.
Yeah, no. So, yeah, of course. I mean, basically, you have Richard Strauss, right? Dr. Richard Strauss. He was, a doctor in Ohio State who sexually assaulted 1,429 kids. Okay,
Jesus.
Students at the school.
Wait, different children?
Well, no. There were 1,429 sexual assaults. Now it could have been, certain ones he could have assaulted several times, and 47 rapes.
Jesus.
So he's a horrible person. Jim Jordan did nothing.
So he knew about it, right?
Yes,
Of course.
Jim Jordan. There's no way he couldn't have known. In fact, there's a guy suing him now. Mm-hmm. This referee who's I guess in hiding, but. He's just doing it on the down low. But he's suing him because he went to Jim Jordan and said, hey, this doctor, he was jerking off in front of me, blah, blah, blah. And then Jim Jordan said, oh, that's just Richard. That's just the way he is.
Yeah.
So, his behavior was totally known. Everyone knew about it. Alice made a really good point that in Ohio, where all this went down, not reporting a crime is actually a crime. Mm-hmm. So I think that's part of the reason why Jim is so adamant about saying, oh, I didn't know, blah, 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 blah. But the thing that I find is really important and that we have to message is that this guy, Jim Jordan, the Republicans are like, oh, this is our guy, right? And who is he? He's basically someone, when given the responsibility and the opportunity to defend the everyday student at Ohio State, he chose not to do that, and he chose to defend a sexual predator, a literal monster who was so bad that he himself knew how bad he was that he killed himself, this doctor. So that's who he chooses to protect. Now, this is in the same way, he's choosing to protect another sexual predator.
43 times accused sexual assaulter and rapist, Donald J. Trump.
Exactly. But I'm choosing not to say accused. So I'm saying that he did rape women. One of them was only 13 years old. I'm saying that he's not accused. He definitely did that. So this is what Jim Jordan does. He will defend the most powerful person who can do the most for him. He's just an opportunist and a disgusting one, and it's really, really horrible. So I think messaging-wise, the senators, congresspeople, mayors, everyone has to pick up this fact and say, this is who the Republicans are. This guy is a great example of what the Republicans are. They're not working for the everyday people. They will allow people to be raped and sexually assaulted while at the same time defending those same monsters. That's who they are. And that message has to get out there.
Absolutely. I mean, it goes back to, I think one of the core tenets that you and I talk about a lot, which is like if you're not part of their in-group, if you're not one of them, then you're expendable. Be it, we can impoverish you, we can disenfranchise you, or we can, sexually assault you. It doesn't matter because we are, they think that they're some sort of Ubermensch or something.
Yeah, no, they work for the powerful,
right?
No matter how or how horrible the accusations are. That's who they work for. And I think this messaging is important. And it's also good, when reporters go to the Congress people that are, and some of them are in the stands too, just listening. They're not part of the proceedings. But when they interview them, they need to speak through the media and say, this is the guy they put up, the guy who won't defend just the regular student, but who will defend a rapist who raped children in the school, and that he was, had a charge in protecting these kids. That's what they need to say, and keep on hitting it, and keep on hitting that point, repeat it over and over again, so that no matter what he says, people are going to say, oh, that guy, the rapist, is protecting another rapist now? Come on. That's what we got to do, is just attack him and attack hard. And that's what Dems don't do. All right, I'm done with my rant. I think Allison wants to say something.
Don't forget, this is the party that says if you rape and assault a woman, you can actually become a lifetime Supreme Court justice.
Yeah, exactly.
That's true. Yeah. Brett Kavanaugh, the poster child for that. I mean, this is just the party of sexual assault.
Yeah, it is.
So it just goes to show, if you are a regular person, particularly someone who's more helpless, then they just expect you to be
right.
To be a brick to hold them up, to elevate them. Yeah.
Right, but that's why, we have to brand. This is another great way to just brand the Republicans as not for the little guy, not for the average person, not for the average student, but for the powerful. And we will protect the powerful even if they rape you and, do horrible things. It's just unbelievable.
Let's face it, Jim Jordan is protecting the pussy grabber.
Yeah. Yeah, and rapist of, don't forget, like I said before, a 13-year-old girl.
And there's so much hypocrisy also. Like Katie Hill had to resign. She didn't commit a crime.
Sure.
She had a consensual relationship.
Yeah. Who cares?
And she resigns. It's despicable how there are the hypocrisy there.
Right.
And that there's, they play by a different set of rules. We try to obey the law. We try to at least avoid the idea of impropriety, and she resigned, and that can be argued if she did the right thing or not. But Republicans don't. They don't care because they have no shame, and they know that as long as they protect, then they could do what they want. They can get away with sexual assault, which seems to be one of the most...
Get away with sexual assault, become president,
campaign finance violations, whatever it is.
Doesn't matter as long as you protect each other. That's why, the court is changing in Trump's image.
Yeah. So we're here with Allison Green, who is a Twitter activist.
Hello, how are you?
It's good to have you, Allison. You were our very first interview.
Yay! So thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So what is a Twitter activist?
I'm not even sure if that's a thing.
Okay.
But we're going to make it a thing.
Okay. Sorry.
So, I think that that a Twitter activist is really somebody who is taking their passion for everything political. And, activism can come in many, many forms. And one of them is your voice. And Twitter is one of the greatest outlets to have a voice, to be able to say what we're thinking. And you said before, this podcast is about not wanting to remain silent. That's what Twitter activism is inspiring each other and lifting each other up and making us stronger together with our voices.
Oh, that's great. Do you post to just Twitter, or do you link it to Facebook or other social media?
I just do Twitter, and I actually was not a social media person at all before this.
We're actually very similar. I kind of got off of social media. I still have my accounts, but I hardly ever post. But now I'm on Twitter quite a bit now.
Twitter is my only outlet. I would be intrigued by Instagram, but I think that what I'm doing politically, first of all, I think that I've found a passion and a love for words.
Okay.
And finding my voice through my words. Twitter is just phenomenal for that. I would love to get off of Facebook. I don't want to be on Facebook.
Yeah, especially in light of... which seems it seems like an episode of The Twilight Zone, of just every few months Zuckerberg's called in front of Congress to say literally the exact same thing. It's like, oh well, I guess I'll do better next time. And they're like, okay, go ahead, Mark.
It's really, really scary.
Yeah.
It's really, really scary. So, Twitter has some issues, but one of the things is it's just been an absolutely powerful platform to be able to unite the people.
Yeah.
Because, one of the things, there's not many things. In fact, actually, maybe there are quite a few awakenings that I personally have had since the Trump era. And one of them is I've realized how much I actually value the Constitution, and we the people is one of the most fundamental parts of it. And Twitter is a great platform for connecting we the people and trying to take back our power through our voice.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you were saying before Trump, you were not politically active. Is that correct?
No. I actually think that there's probably quite a few like me out there that we were woke. We literally were. And I mean, I was somebody who had it in my peripheral. I was just not engaged. I was a voter. I definitely went and I always voted. But, a conversation came around at a dinner party, and I will be the first to admit that I did not necessarily trust politicians or what they were saying. And rightfully so.
Yes,
I'm learning.
Yeah.
Rightfully so. But I used to actually take a quote from the comedian Sir Billy Connolly all the time.
Oh, yeah.
I kind of varied it a little bit for myself, but and I know that you have talked about having, a passion for politics, so please don't take this offensively.
No, not at all. No.
But he said the desire to become a politician should immediately disqualify you from the job.
I think that's fair enough. That's fair enough.
You know what, though? Yeah. I've seen that's been inspiring since the Trump era is that I no longer believe in that statement, because I think that the freshman class, for example, has brought us so many politicians who didn't necessarily have a desire to be politicians until they saw our democracy under attack. And I think that's been one of the healthiest outcomes of Trump, is all of these new great Democrats that we've been able to embrace.
I think you're absolutely right about that. Something like that, and you hear it all the time from people, or something similar. But I think that's kind of like, what do they call it, like kitchen wisdom or something like that, of that, just to be cynical for cynicism's sake, kind of allows, I would say, kind of allows people who want to take advantage of Americans, of the system, to get away with it. Because
right.
if you just say, it goes back to muddying the waters and just saying both are equal. I got into this. I got into politics for a number of reasons. But I also had the privilege to work for somebody for a while who was extraordinarily moral, who was and really, really entered politics because he wanted to do the right thing.
Yes.
And wanted to make a difference as well.
And I see that now. And I'm so I'm so glad I'm woke, and I'm so, in a way, surprised that I was not as aware of the political environment. But I did what so many people did, which is I woke up on the morning, on that horrible morning where Trump was in office, and life as I knew it had just changed for me. And I cannot imagine going backwards. And I still think that it's so important because so many of us have been woke, but we talk all of the time about trying to convert Trump people to, to getting them out of the cult. But the reality is that, we had the highest voting turnout in 2016 at 58%, but that means that was it 58%? I'll have to check that. I believe it was 58%, which actually means that you've got 42% of the country who did not vote. And I mean, I was at least a voter, but that's 42% of the country that I believe are somewhere else. They're watching Bravo or HGTV or immersed in their lives, going to concerts, going to movies. And those are the people that we need to reach out of our echo chamber to get to. Yeah.
I mean, messaging is only half the battle. This is only our second show, but we ended the last one, and we'll end hopefully every show like this with saying, messaging is only half the battle. Mobilization is the other half. And
yes, how to disseminate these messages as well, and reach the people that we haven't been able to reach. So
on that note, you actually have quite a number of followers on Twitter. How? What do you attribute that to? Do you have a lot of friends and family, or
no? In fact, I get very surprised. I think that I could probably count on one hand the people who follow me on Twitter and know me in real life.
Oh, really? Okay.
I don't really know. No, it happened really. It just kind of happened organically. So, I actually woke up that day after Trump. I can tell you the journey. I actually woke up the day of Trump, and I was like everybody else, kind of ranting and raving, in my living room, out my TV, thinking, what is going to happen? This is crazy. What are we going to do? And I really got involved in the healthcare debate, and that was really interesting to me. And I kept watching the healthcare debate, and the longer it went on, the more I said to myself, why is it that I am thinking about things and I see things that they are not talking about and I don't understand? In all of the conversations about healthcare, I didn't feel like anybody was pointing at the corporations and big pharma and insurance and the responsibility that, there is capitalism and then there's extreme greed of and exploitation of capitalism.
Sure.
And I didn't feel like that was being discussed. So I actually decided that I was looking to try and see if I could come up with a solution myself. And I thought about maybe trying to set up a not-for-profit. I thought if you can't beat them, join them, and maybe to do like some kind of lobbying for good, not evil.
Right, yeah.
And I said to myself, you know what? I want to see if I can float this out there and if other people are thinking like I'm thinking. So it was I remember it was July 4th weekend, Independence Day. And I just had never thought about how ironic it was. I mean, here we are celebrating Independence Day while our country was under attack, and our democracy that we're supposed to be valuing and celebrating is being torn out from underneath us. So I really felt like I couldn't actually celebrate. And I was sitting with a friend and I said, you know what? I don't know anything about social media, but I think that people use this Twitter thing and maybe I should do that and see if I can figure it out and see if people agree with me. So July 4th weekend in 2017, I had my friend, she said, I'll follow you. And she was my 9th follower.
Wow. Okay.
I don't even know where the other 8 had come from. I had signed up through like LinkedIn years before. And I started to really not know that anybody was listening. It was kind of like calling out into the dark. And I started throwing out lots of facts. I was a researcher, and I was researching the hell out of healthcare. And, I discovered that, the money that was being spent on advertising, and yet us in New Zealand were the only countries in the world that were advertising pharmaceuticals to consumers. Nobody else in the world actually advertises pharmaceuticals, and look at how many billions we were spending on advertising it. And I
think it's nuts. I mean, when I go to the doctor, they say you need XYZ. I go, okay, sure. But that must be, I guess we're not necessarily the target audience, I guess, in some areas maybe.
Well, I mean, the thing is that it used to be that you were not allowed to advertise medicine on the air. And
I think I'm old enough to remember that, actually.
Yeah, well, I definitely do. And now it's kind of, look how much healthcare is costing us. But if we said to them, you can no longer advertise, that takes billions out of the budgets that's being spent. So I just started throwing out their facts, and I found a lot of people were thinking along the same lines as me, and were passionate about it. Sure. And I just started to get some followers who, I guess the biggest comments I get is people are saying to me that I'm thinking what they're thinking. That's the greatest compliment I can get, because I thought I was alone. And, I guess I'm not anymore.
I vaguely remember, I don't know the exact number, but it was astronomically high of pharmaceutical companies spending so much more on R&D.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, so much more on marketing.
Marketing and advertising.
Than R&D.
Yeah, it's. I mean,
and that with the patent laws,
it's monopolies, and the pharmaceutical. Those marketing budgets are taking doctors to Las Vegas.
Oh, sure.
I mean, it is entertaining, and it's our healthcare should not be for sale.
But that wasn't something that even the ACA didn't quite fix that. I mean, it wasn't Trump that was, Trump becoming president, that changed. Was it that, the Republicans were huffing and puffing about repealing the ACA that made you get into it? Was there something specific?
Yeah. So sorry, I actually just saw this big healthcare debate going on, and I really felt as though it was one of the crippled systems. We have the ACA, but I also had lived overseas for a number of years. Mm-hmm. So I lived in Australia, where you got your healthcare from your government. So I had seen a lot of different ways of it happening, and I wanted to be involved in that fight. But going forward, when we had that amazing vote and we were able to make sure that the Republicans did not tear down our health care, I started to realize that all roads to fix healthcare, to fix guns, to fix the climate and the planet, all roads lead to Trump. And
which lead to Russia.
Which that is then on a one-way road to Russia. Yeah. And I realized that, we were not going to change healthcare. We were not going to change guns. We were not going to change the inequality of wealth in this country until we could actually take care of not only Trump, but the Republicans who were actually attacking us from actually being able to make progress. Mm-hmm. So all of my focus became on Trump.
So, Allison, what kind of tweets do you send out?
I kind of have probably, I guess, 3 or 4 different little categories of them. And, my biggest thing is I'm pretty unfiltered. I shoot from the hip. I'm direct, tell it like it is, and I really come from a place of heart and passion a lot of the time. But my main things are, I believe that in this time of great pain, we need to be able to laugh. And so I definitely have some humor tweets that I go out there with. I then do a lot of, one of the things when I started talking with Dan is what you guys are doing with the podcast is what reminds me of my tweets. I actually am very big on messaging, and I see something and I just restate it. I'm very interested all of the time. A lot of my tweets are just taking something and just restating it in a way that I think is stronger and more powerful. I definitely try and do that. I've done some threads, and threads are amazing. I have had a couple of weekends that I have gotten lost doing some threads, and I try to always remember tips on tweets, facts. Research. I like to give my sources. I try to make sure that I can, stand by my tweets in a way that I can be proud. So, so they're very well. I try to make sure that they're well researched. So I do humor, I do passionate politics, I do remessaging, and I do my threads. I think those are my typical tweets, and my Twitter tips would be just to be consistent. I'm sending out a lot of tweets. Sometimes I do spend a lot of time on a tweet. Sometimes they're just, I put them out there. Just like I could literally, in 5 minutes, I could probably do 20 tweets. They sometimes come out pretty quick.
Wow. Okay. What do you think ordinary people can do to get more involved like you have?
I think that it's keeping it up. And I think that there are so many different ways. I was so inspired just the other day. Actually, I think it was just yesterday to see the Brett Kavanaugh dinner. And we refuse to forget. We're not going to let these things go. And Brett Kavanaugh was actually being asked to speak by the Federal Society. And
the Federalist Society.
And we had these amazing activists came out, drove a truck up, put a screen up, and actually showed Dr. Christine Blasey Ford's testimony as all of the guests walked in to hear Brett Kavanaugh speak. They were having to see and having to hear us tell everybody that we believe the survivors. And I think that it's the messaging, it's the persistence of that messaging, and it's taking the messaging that they're flipping and just restating it to make sure that they don't steal our truth from us.
So we need to be more on the offense, and we need to clap back when as often as because they repeat. It's marketing.
And we need to call it out.
We need to call it out.
We need to call it out all of the time. And we need to call out false equivalencies. We need to be, they take grains of truth and exploit it and spin it.
Well, that's the best
and
lie.
Gaslight us.
That's how you con someone. You have little grains of truth and the rest is a lie.
Yeah, and I think that it's really about always taking the step back and saying, wait, no, I'm not going to be gaslit here, and restating it to say, this is what it's really about.
So aside from being a Twitter activist, do you participate in things in real life as well?
A bit. That's how I met Dan, actually, by going to Rise and Resist events. And I'm definitely looking to expand that. Twitter was something that became, really became passionate, and I realized that this is one of the areas that I really felt that I excelled in, to be able to get my voice out there. And so I started to get out to the events, but I realized that I was reaching more people through Twitter. I'm so, it's amazing that I now have 72,000 followers. I didn't think that would happen.
But you've marched as well.
Yes,
and
I've marched, and I think that what I would say is, the hardest part of saving a democracy sometimes is putting on your sneakers.
I think you're right. For years and years, I was not, even though I've always been interested in politics, I did not participate in marches, and now I'm try to go to every single one of them.
We definitely need to take to the streets more, and it's hard because you look at the absolutely amazing people in Hong Kong, and you look at the other protests around the world, but I actually lived for 5 years in Hong Kong. I can tell you, Hong Kong is the size of Rhode Island, but with 8 million people, or at least when I lived there were 8 million people in.
There must be more now.
I think, if anything, it might be 9, but it's still small. And you've got the size of Rhode Island. If you could imagine, if our country was the size of Rhode Island, we would all be stumbling all over each other on the streets.
Sure,
and so it definitely is hard. You've got amazing people. I think it's, I forgive me if I'm mispronouncing his name, but Bryce Tashi is in the Midwest, I believe in Missouri, but I have to go check that. But he gets out, and just with a sign, and he'll just get out himself, and he spurred a movement as well. And so I've done it myself. I've just gone with one other person or just myself, and I stood at Trump Tower and protested.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you.
We need to start stimulating that, I think.
Has anybody ever contacted you and said, "Hey, you've really inspired me. You helped me get out. You helped me do something. You helped me even become another Twitter activist, or do something else"?
I have an amazing group that I've messaged with and DM'd that have started to reach out to me, and I've reached back out to them and became friends with them. And I actually had a period where I had some things going on in my life, and I had to step away and was not tweeting as much, and I had people reach out and say, "We miss you. Where are you?"
That's great.
So yeah, there's definitely I think of it as we are a brother sisterhood of the resistance. And by the way, in terms of messaging, I cannot tell you how much I hear the media talk about Trump supporters, but I so rarely hear them talk about the resistance. They're, we're overshadowed. We're irrelevant as the majority, and instead they're focusing on the minority. But I think
the New York Times writes another piece about this. Well, we found this Trump supporter out in this diner in the middle.
Right. They talk about his base all the time, and they don't talk about the majority of Americans who want to take back our country from, the growing dictatorship. They don't talk about it at all. And I will be the first person to fight against the attacks on the media, and I want to defend them. Yeah. But at the same time,
they don't make it easy.
I want to talk about journalism versus entertainment.
Yeah.
I want to talk about action versus reaction, and their constant reaction to the Trump, as opposed to focusing on the stories that he's trying to distract us from.
Well, yeah. And that's what we talked about, I think, a little bit earlier, was because for the media, it's cheap and it's easy. They could just say, "Look at this nonsense you said," and then talk about that, as opposed to actually putting in the effort to respond to it and put it in a more small d democratic frame, a frame of democracy versus authoritarianism and white supremacy. But they'll just say, "Hey, he's a lunatic. He said this."
Yeah, we have some journalistic heroes out there.
Mm-hmm.
they are fewer and farther between than I would actually like.
Yeah.
But you've got some amazing journalists who've dug up some amazing things.
Oh, absolutely.
And they get lost in the shuffle though so often, and the news cycle is just so quick that it's like, hey, wait, oh yeah, maybe Trump did steal from his charity $2 million, but
which barely made a blip. Nobody even noticed it. And
nobody's talking about it.
For Trump knows that.
Yeah.
And they know that, which is why he will constantly go on and on and on. And it doesn't matter what, it doesn't matter how debunked, it just means that people are talking about that. And by the time you've talked about, X, he's already done Y.
Yeah.
And he's moved on. And that's a way of promoting cynicism. Mm-hmm. And it's a way of promoting a distraction to, when cynicism and distraction, win, then democracy loses, and you will get more Republicans, you will get more authoritarianism, things will move further to the right there.
Yeah.
And that's something to worry about. But he knows what he's doing in that. He might be an idiot, but he knows what he's doing in that.
He is a strategic idiot. And, I've said this to Dan before too. I think that so many of the lies are strategic. I think that there's deflection, purposeful deflection, as part of the strategy. The increased news cycle, he's doing that for exactly the reasons that we're talking about. Is it doesn't give us a chance to get to our stories.
Exactly. Yeah.
They talk about, and you talked about, Trump supports our military is the image that's out there. Well, what about the fact that he was out there saying, I'm taking charitable donations to give to our veterans, and instead he used them for himself.
Right. That requires actual, people to actually read the news, but you can just see a sign that says Trump supports the military. So that's it's against us, but it's effective messaging.
Yeah.
When, he's stealing money from veterans.
Yeah.
That's what he's doing. He's stealing money from veterans.
It's like mugging an old lady on the street. It's one of the worst things you could possibly be doing, and kicking kittens.
I think it falls into very much that Republican mindset, which is, I got mine, and, it doesn't, however you did it, you're someone else. You're an outsider. I'm rich. Therefore, your very existence is to, as an Untermenschen, is to serve me. So if he has to steal money from vets, then in his mind, it's fine. That's why you see such terrible legislation from Republicans, which cut, healthcare, that cuts education, that cuts Medicaid, it cuts Social Security, it cuts national security, so that way they can afford, quote unquote afford, they still blow up the debt, which then they yell about when there are Democrats in office, but so they can give America's money, hardworking Americans' money, away to their cronies.
Yeah. I think you're touching on something also that was a big passion of mine. I have been in a unique situation to be around a lot of people of extreme wealth. And it has allowed me, I've worked for multiple millionaires and billionaires, and it allowed me to see some of the extremes in our society. And, you talk about taking away healthcare, taking away education. One of the passions behind the healthcare too was that, we as a country can afford healthcare. We can afford education and it's not only if they weren't spending it on the military, it's also the fact that you and I and Dan, we pay our taxes.
Right, they don't.
They don't.
Yeah.
This is extreme wealth that I wouldn't have as hard of a time with the extreme wealth if they were paying their contributions to our society. And that to me is one of the injustices that we have to fight to correct.
Absolutely. According to Thomas Piketty, roughly 60% of Americans' wealth is inherited, meaning most people did not actually work for that money. And another thing I saw was if Warren's tax, and this is not promoting any one candidate, but if Warren's tax had been in place from 1982, Jeff Bezos would still have $49 billion. Bill Gates would have $14 billion, Bloomberg $12 billion, and we'd all have child care and healthcare, student debt relief, and 4 times more federal money for public schools. That was by Brad Lander brought us that. So.
Our country was not built to be able to exist with only the middle class contributing to the taxes.
Yeah.
And it really has become that the tax burden is on the average person, and then they're raising our health care because they're saying that we as a country can't afford it. I don't have a problem with capitalism. Yeah. I have a problem with people not paying their taxes. And before we actually talk about adding taxes, I want to talk about collecting the taxes that already exist, because wasn't it Mitt Romney who was only paying 13% or something? And let me tell you, I think that was after he had doctored all of the books and figured out all the charitable donations to make it as much as 13%.
Oh, of course. Yeah, the dog on the roof of his car is paying more in taxes.
And we all know that Trump was paying 0.
Yeah.
So I think that we cannot correct the financial and economic inequality in this country until we take back our government from the people who are trying to avoid paying their taxes.
Yeah. One of the things that that we just didn't have time for in the main part of the podcast that I wish we did was, I mentioned in the beginning, Lewis Powell writing the Powell Memo, which basically told the business community in the 70s, you have to unite, you have to give money to spend on lobbying, or they will come for you. Because if you break it down, it's either who's going to regulate whom. Either America will regulate businesses, or businesses will regulate the American people. So it boggles my mind that we have something like the Business Roundtable and we have the Chamber of Commerce, but what we don't have is a chamber of democracy. What we don't have, everyone has individual causes, and they're all wonderful and they're all worthy causes, but they are individual, and they are fractured. It's my belief that we really have to make a concerted effort as progressives and as Americans to really come together and have people like Greenpeace align themselves with NARAL, with Black Lives Matter, with with unions, because unless we stand united, as the business community does, then they will continue to keep their feet on our throats more and more and more. And we see this from the so-called party of business.
Absolutely. I mean, you asked in the beginning what Twitter activism is. I do believe that we need a platform like Twitter to be able to come together with our ideas, with our thoughts, and put together that joint approach, because they've almost, by separating us, have managed to keep us suppressed, and especially economically suppressed. And
that's the idea, to turn us on each other so they can rob us.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. So that's also a passion project of mine.
Where can people find you on Twitter? Obviously,
At Grassroots Speak. I actually, when I started out, I said, you know what? I guess I'm just trying to be a voice in the grassroots. So at Grassroots Speak on Twitter, and you'll see different kinds of tweets from me, because I personally believe that in some of our most painful times, we have to laugh. So I definitely have humorous tweets. I have some researched, and I have a lot of passionate political tweets. So, and it's about getting us all together and starting to unite us. So I hope you'll follow me on Twitter at Grassroots Speak.
Allison Green, thank you so much for coming on today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
That's it for this episode of E Potibus Unum. Thanks for joining us today.
Yes, thank you very much, guys.
And our thanks again to Allison Green.
Yes.
Woo. Remember, everyone, as important as messaging is, it's only half the battle. Mobilization is the other. And we certainly hope to talk more about that in future episodes.
Get out to the streets, guys.
Even on Twitter, whatever you can do.
Yeah.
Everything. Be sure to follow us on Twitter. We're at ePodibus. That's at EPODIBUS. And if you like the show, please give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcasts. Tell a friend, tell a family member, tell your stuffed animals.
Tell your aunt, Ethel, who's such a gossip.
Ethel.
Tell her we can have her spread the word around.
Tell an enemy. It doesn't matter. Just tell anyone.
Yeah, exactly. Tell them, Tell them that there's a secret.
And it's called ePodibus Unum. And you could get it on all your podcast apps.
Yeah, actually, if you just search for Podibus, it'll come up.
Also, we'd love to hear from you, so please send your feedback to epodibus@gmail.com. Again, epodibus@gmail.com. And lastly, we're looking for an intern to help out. It's just me and Dan here, so we would love for anybody, if you're interested in politics, we'd love to go a little bit more in depth, maybe do this more than once a week. So if you'd like to help out, we'd love to have you. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
All right, see you next week. Bye.